I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Okay, I want to do an update on Airbnb. It's been probably a year and a half since I've done anything on Airbnb. If you guys want to learn more about Airbnb, I was one of the first realtors, I think, to really start digging into Airbnb about 7-8 years ago. Go back and watch some of my blogs from 5-6 years ago on Airbnb when it first started to get popular and came to Vancouver here. Because I get a lot of comments from people and people ask me all the time, hey, maybe I'm thinking about buying a condo and running it as an Airbnb, or buying multiple condos and running several Airbnbs. And also people saying, well, does Airbnb have a big impact? Has it had a big impact on the Vancouver real estate market? In other words, people renting out on Airbnb, has it affected the rental market and tenancy, vacancy rates and everything else? These days, no, not at all. There's no impact at all, because Airbnb, for the most part, as I get to in a minute, is completely illegal. There are some Airbnbs still out there in downtown Vancouver. Most of them are illegal. They're renters, posing as renters, subletting these out on Airbnb. But 7 or 8 years ago, go back and watch my blogs. When Airbnb first came out, it had an impact on the Vancouver real estate market. I did a number of videos. I have probably in excess of 300 investor clients in and around downtown Vancouver, Richmond, Burnaby, that are clients of mine that own, some of them own multiple condos, homes, detached homes, one-bedroom condos. So I had a lot of them around 8-9 years ago that went into that Airbnb situation. The tenant, they were renting these units unfurnished on 1-year leases. Airbnb was hot, it was new, lots of money to be made. There was no restrictions, no strata restrictions on Airbnb. So a lot of them were converting from vacant 1-year leases to furnished by the night on Airbnb. And they were incredibly successful at it. They made boatloads of money. But the party, as I blogged about many years ago, it was on borrowed time. You could tell. It was only a matter of time before the stratas were going to start cracking down on this, because in some of these buildings there was 7, 8, 9, 10 Airbnbs being run. People were coming and going nonstop, luggage, parties, marijuana being smoked in the common areas, garbage being left in the hallways. It was turning these condos into a hotel. So it was on borrowed time, and eventually what happened, several years later, the stratas slowly started passing new bylaws outlawing Airbnb. So as of right now, most stratas in, let's just call it downtown Vancouver, Kitts, Olympic Village area, I would say 90% of the strata out there now have an Airbnb bylaw in place forbidding Airbnb. Some stratas will allow up to as low as a 1-month furnished rental, but most are 3 months, 6 months. A lot of stratas are still at a 1-year rental minimum. So the party stopped pretty quick. It took about 2 years before kind of all the stratas slowly started putting in those new rules. Then the final kick to the can was about 3 years ago. City of Vancouver essentially banned Airbnb unless you followed a couple of criteria. The big one was the strata you were in had to allow legal Airbnb. And that right there, again, is restricting it by about 90%. So just off topic, I only have on my list, I know every single strata that allows Airbnb. I only have about 7 or 8 buildings that allow Airbnb that I would feel comfortable with getting a client into. There's a whole bunch more that do allow Airbnb, but I would not buy in those. I've sold in some of them. I've sold them. But I would probably not buy in them for a myriad of reasons. The big one is a lot of times the insurance deductible is through the roof. Some of them are at $500,000, $700,000 water deductibles, because it's basically a hotel with people coming and going. There are some good ones though. There's a good one in Mount Pleasant. I'm not going to give you the name of it. And it can make sense for certain buyers on these, which I'll get to in a minute. But the city of Vancouver, this is where people do not understand where the Airbnb is and what the rules are. I'm going to tell you. You have to allow that strata. That strata has to allow legal Airbnb. So that's almost none. And I only have maybe about half a dozen that I would say were worth buying into that allow Airbnb. But here's the kicker that most people don't realize. That unit has to be your principal residence. You can only have one principal residence. You can't go and buy multiple Airbnbs or multiple units, even if the strata allows it. You can only live in one unit and designate it as your principal unit, as your principal home. So it has to be your principal residence. You have to live in it, personally live in it for at least 6 months out of the year, and then you have to get a license from the city of Vancouver. So when you weed all those down, Strata has to allow it. The Strata has to be good in the first place to even wanna. There's a lot of Stratas, as I say, that allow Airbnb, but I wouldn't go near them with a 10-foot barge pole. It has to be your principal residence. You have to live in it for at least 6 months of the year, and then you can rent it out the other half of the year with a license from the city of Vancouver. And they do audit these things. They look into these. They'll audit you on these. So a lot of people don't understand this. They think I'm going to buy multiple units and turn them into Airbnb. They think every strata allows Airbnb, which very few do, and it has to be your principal residence. That's the big kicker. Here's where it can make sense on the buy side. I've had a couple of these in the last year and a half. There's a really good strata, about 6 years old in Olympic Village area, Mount Pleasant. Good strata. They allow legal Airbnb, has to be your principal residence. I had a buyer who was in the film industry. He's in production in the film industry, so he travels a lot for work. He goes on location. Worked out absolutely perfect for him. He's the perfect buyer for this and allow Airbnb because he goes away for 3-4 weeks at a time on location, can rent the unit out when he's not there on Airbnb by the night, and it works perfect. I have another client in the Gastown area, same situation. He has an office in Los Angeles and also travels to Australia several times a year for 4 or 5 weeks at a time for work. Works perfect for him. Goes away for 5 weeks, puts it on Airbnb, can rent it out for 20 or 30 nights at $200 a night. That's the situation where those work. But if you're looking to become a full-time hotelier and running full-time Airbnbs in multiple properties, it's illegal. You can't do it. Now, I think that I hear through the grapevine that there are ways to get around it. I don't want to get involved in any of that kind of stuff. I don't know. I've heard rumors about fake tenancy agreements and all kinds of crazy, wacky stuff. Again, I would not do it. Risky. City of Vancouver does clamp down on this stuff. They are keeping an eye on Airbnb website. You have to have a license. If they see an address that doesn't match up to someone having a license for that address, they're going to look into it. They also audit you, just like the empty homes tax and the BC spec tax. There's audits on these. You better be careful. So again, just to summarize here, you have to be in a strata that allows legal Airbnb. Very limited. Again, very few. There are some, but when you weed it down to the strata that I would want to buy into, not many. It has to be your principal residence. You have to live in this. You can only have one principal residence. And then you can rent it out part-time on Airbnb, but you have to have a license through the city. So it really weeds it down. I've told you guys, where most of these Airbnbs, a lot of them still, and I've done many blogs on this. If you're a landlord, this is your biggest fear as a landlord. This is my biggest fear as a landlord. When you're interviewing tenants, you better do your due diligence on this, because this is what they do. They pose as a tenant. They come in, they look great. He's in a suit. This is my wife. We're a young couple. We're, in tech. Love your place. We're going to move into it, make it our home. And then they turn around and put it on Airbnb and rent it illegally. And they know what they're doing. They're pros. They know that it's only a matter of time before they're going to get caught. It doesn't take long. They clone fobs and all kinds of crazy stuff as well. But with our crazy tenancy board here, which favors the tenants all the way over here, the landlord has almost zero rights these days. It's nuts. I've done lots of blogs on that. The eviction process to get these illegal Airbnb tenants out can take months and months and months, and they know the racket. They know it's going to take months, no problem. I'll just keep renting it out at $250 a month, pocketing the money. Eventually they're going to finally kick me out, and then I'll leave. And that's what's going on. So that's why you got to be really careful. Most of those Airbnbs are illegal. A lot of them too are being run out of rental-only buildings. That's where a lot of these are. There's a rental building across the street from where I live, and I know that they've had all kinds of issues with Airbnb in there. It's like, playing whack-a-mole in some of these rental buildings. And that's why I tell you guys, these rental-only buildings, they're no fun. They're building all these new purposely built rental. Great, we need more rental, but I don't know why you'd want to live in one. Any serious tenant that wants a good home is going to rent from an individual landlord like me in a stratified condo that's 50, 60, 70% owner occupied. That's the way to go. So that's the situation. Final thing I'll just leave you with, it's off topic, because a lot of people ask, do I own any shares? I'm an investor. Do I own any shares in Airbnb or Uber? No, I do not at all. Both these companies, listen, if you were in on the ground floor on Uber and Airbnb, you made some money. I hope you sold, though. Neither one of those stocks has done much lately. Not investable companies for me. I don't see Uber, I don't see how the taxi business is a terrible business. Terrible. I just don't see a road to profitability with something like Uber. I really don't. At least nothing of any real significance. And the same thing with Airbnb. Most cities now are heavily clamping down on Airbnb. Where Airbnb does work, and even this is a little bit of a gray area, a detached house with a basement suite. I had sold a few properties over the years that had that kind of setup. The owner lives upstairs. They rent out the basement suite on Airbnb. That can work. I believe, though, I know there's laneway homes that are on Airbnb, but I think that's illegal. I don't think the city of Vancouver will allow you to rent an Airbnb in a coach house unless you're living in the coach house full time as the owner, and then you could rent it out part time. It's a gray area, but it can work in the detached market. But the cities are clamping down on this. Santa Monica, my wife, I was an early adopter of Airbnb. I don't use it anymore. I haven't used it in probably 4 years. I'm back to hotels. I like staying in luxury hotels. I think the experience is just far better. Plus, those Airbnb rates skyrocketed. I remember my wife and I used to rent a bungalow in Santa Monica. This is back 7-8 years ago for $180 a night. It was great. Santa Monica about 4 years ago completely banned Airbnb. So then we went to Venice, California. We were staying there for a while, but those rates skyrocketed up once Airbnb was banned in Santa Monica. I can see the same thing happening here. It's probably only a matter of time. Already a lot of US cities are doing that, just banning Airbnb outright. So for that reason, I would never invest in the stock of Airbnb. I think its future is dodgy, to say the least, and mixed, and I just don't think it's all that profitable. It's not a good business model. Remember, investments are only as good as what else you can invest your money in. A company like Apple or Google, or just some blue chip stuff like a Visa or a Home Depot, far better business models than Uber and Airbnb. But that's just my opinion on it. I'm Owen Bigland. Hope this sets the record straight a little better on Airbnb. I'll see you next week.